Hello and welcome to Pappy Hour, episode 16.
Episode 16. Here we are.
Very kind of bright and sunny day in San Diego here, in between a couple rainstorms.
Yep, I had a nice, delicious coffee today, so I'm caffeinated and ready to go.
Ooh, on the caffeine.
Yeah,
I don't have caffeine. I've just got some bubbly water here.
just bubbly water. That's very
Well,
nice.
Today's topic, we're just going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on some history, and we're going to talk about the history of sea travel.
Maritime travel,
Maritime
which
travel.
I am personally very fascinated with. Any kind of ancient historical sea voyages and the characters that are part of these sea voyages that we know, and some of you don't know. So you have a lot of good info
I did a
to
little
disclose.
research. And found out some interesting tidbits. This is a topic you could have a degree in college on.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just as far as world history goes, this is a planet covered by what, 70% water. So sea travel has been vital to the history of the world.
Yeah, the discovery of the world. Nothing would be discovered without venturing out to sea.
Yeah, and all the trade that's taken place, and of course the discoveries and the mixing of cultures. So we find it very interesting, and we find it that a lot of things that we have talked about um, over the time, some of the topics, a lot of them involve some kind of sea travel and discovery.
Yeah, so we
So,
thought we'd dedicate an episode solely to it. We hope you enjoy it. And, Pappy Hour is kind of a mix of stories and happenings and whatnot. But really, the core of this podcast is history. So if you're a history buff and you care to listen, we hope you enjoy.
yeah. So let's start with the oldest known boat on record. How's that? I mean, the oldest boat ever discovered, okay? It's a little boat.
I'm guessing it was made of wood
It was made of a pine log.
because that's how they can carbon date it, by
Yes.
organic material only.
Yes. And it was found when they were building a highway in Holland. They were building
Oh,
a highway in a peat bog, and the boat turned up and, in the excavator. And it was in a little town called, and the oldest known boat is called the Pessy Canoe. And it is approximately 8,000 years BC.
dang.
So it's 8,000 BC.
Well, 2000
right-
is Jesus.
Yeah, so it's a 10,000-year-old logboat.
4 times older than than Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So it's about 3 meters long. So it's 9 to 10 feet long, and only really this was weird. It's only 17 inches wide.
Oh, so just a real skinny canoe.
Just a little skinny canoe. Slip your butt in there and go out on the water. And this was along the coast of Holland, like in between, called in between Belgium and Denmark, along
And they
that
have a
whole.
nice is man-made their bay, or is that a nice big natural bay that they have? I'm guessing it's natural because it's huge
Well, it was
in the north of Holland.
yeah, it was all bogs and
Yeah.
wetlands,
Yeah.
right? So there were people, there were cultures there
It was a natural place to
10,000
boat.
years ago. The Vikings were at 1,000. So this is 9,000 years before the Vikings set terror upon Northern Europe, and they were cruising around on boats. So if you really look at where the Vikings were in 1000 AD, they had 9,000 years to hone their skills of that boat.
Yeah. They
And
were
they
experts by the
and,
time they were sailing to Iceland.
and they think there's boats before that, and a lot of them are in the Pacific Islands, um, around all of you came up with the term
Austronesia,
Austronesia.
which is what they called kind of the ancient seafaring explorers that came originally out of Australia and expanded into the Polynesian islands, expanded into the Philippines, expanded all the way out to Sri Lanka and the Indian Sea and out to Madagascar.
Yeah,
As far
what
west as
year are you talking? What year are you talking?
God,
Like longer than 8,000 BC. This goes back even further.
yeah, this is like ancient civilizations, but
Well, 8,000 BC is pretty ancient.
Yeah.
So
Anything
so
anything past, like, Jesus Christ to me is ancient,
yeah, I
but,
mean, and this all starts the history of boats getting around. It definitely can start at 10,000 years ago.
yeah,
So we have the Pensy canoe, a 9 foot long little canoe, but because the boats were made of reeds, grasses, woods, they didn't survive, right? You dig them, you put them under mud, and they just disintegrate
they
in a
can
couple,
become part of the earth again.
yeah, a couple hundred years. Something can do. I mean, I have a tool buried out in the backyard, and in 5 years, it looks like it's a antique. So can you imagine what a few hundred years in a peat bog does?
Yeah,
So for some reason, this little canoe survived, and the guys dug it up, said, "Oh, this looks like something interesting," and it's in a big
yeah.
museum in Holland now.
So just real quick, for the Austronesian expansion,
Mhm.
um, apparently they kind of laid the groundwork for modern day maritime trade routes in South Asia and the Arabian Sea, so approximately like 1,000 to 600 BC.
Oh, that's that recent.
So kind of I mean, when was Mesopotamia and our first modern day
Okay,
civilizations formed?
okay,
This was kind of on the brink of that. So not quite
yeah, but
10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years ago of, humans like, when we were evolving into
yeah,
who we are, but, um,
okay, so a
modern day the
thousand.
brink of modern day civilization.
Okay, so after the really uh, first big ship makers who had a navy were the Egyptians, and this goes back from 6,000 to 4,000 BC. So now we're talking 6,000, 6 to 8,000 years ago. The Egyptians started building boats, and definitely by 4,000 BC, they were building large boats. They were carrying um, goods, and they were having them for trade. They had a navy going, so they had them to defend their shoreline. And
Question.
why is Egypt so crazy? I'll get into that question.
Crazy meaning, like, advanced and
Yeah, yeah. What?
well, my question is, where did they learn how to build ships? Who did they learn how to build ships from?
I don't know. I don't know that, but it was out of necessity. So the necessity was they were along the Nile River,
Yeah.
and the Nile River was an instant highway. It was I-5 of 4,000 BC. Okay. And because just think of how you have to travel the sea, right? You need wind in your direction, but if wind's working against currents, how do you get from A to B? Now, the Nile River runs due south to north. It comes out of the mountains up high in Ethiopia, and it runs due north into the Mediterranean Sea. So it was easy flowing downriver. You had a current steadily flowing you from south to north. The prevailing winds of Egypt carry north to south. So going upriver, you had the wind at your back, filling your sails, and going downriver, you had the current.
So either way, it was just easy to navigate.
It was a win-win.
Yeah.
So, and what was around there were a lot of these big reeds. So the first boats they built of reeds, so it was grasses, and so they would tie them together and make these boats, and they were um,
Kinda
uh,
like
uh,
big baskets.
it was a big floating basket, and they were up in the front, up in the back. They didn't have a keel; they were flat bottom, but they did have sails on them, or they would oar them. So
You mean like a
oars and
hole, like,
sails.
at the bottom of a rounded boat like we know today? They were flat?
Yeah,
Kinda like a
a
barge?
keel is something that sticks down and gives you stability.
Oh, yeah, I should know that.
So they didn't have keels on them, and they didn't need it when you were in a river,
So
right?
shallow.
Well, it was shallow. Um, you don't want a keel because if you were going over rocks,
Yeah,
you just went river rafting in Costa Rica. Can you imagine if your raft had a keel, you'd snap it off.
yeah.
So then also with Egypt and where Cairo is, it was along the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean is just you almost could walk the entire Mediterranean, right? Around.
That would be a cool adventure.
So you could sail, and they would sail during the day. And if you look, they went out in further directions, and we know they went out at least to where current Lebanon, Israel, Lebanon is, because they got cedar logs from Lebanon. I guess Lebanon had these huge cedar trees.
And Lebanon is up kind of in the eastern portion of the Mediterranean, up above kinda near Turkey, south of Turkey or north of Turkey?
South of Turkey, on the east side of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
But they did some kind of trade because they had these big log ships. So then they started using a lot of wood in building wooden ships.
Mhm.
So they had bigger and bigger ships, but they didn't use nails in their ships. They tied their boards together and then stuck reeds, grasses, or muds in between and made these ships.
That's really
And we know this history of Egypt because what did Egypt do better than almost any other civilization
document their history.
through how they do it?
Hieroglyphics.
Yes. They painted everything on the walls. They were the masters of graffiti. Okay. They started the graffiti revolution.
Thank God they did too, I
Did
mean,
because that boat didn't hold up in the water or in the
yeah,
mud, but their paintings on the walls and their tombs
but neither do books. You
and
know, you
books
write
rot
down
away
your
too.
books rot away, but if you carve your history into the stone, they knew the
Yes.
stone was gonna be around a lot longer than the paper
Yes.
books.
And that's why we know the Egyptians were really the first culture that 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 modernized shipbuilding
Record keeping,
and it had great record keeping.
mathematics, art, you know, they had domestic cats, you know, like, they were kind of the
They
first
did have cats. They
they
liked it.
they were the first that we know of, really, because they documented themselves so well,
Yeah.
that we know of, that really is just a more ancient version of our modern day civilization, how they lived,
Yeah. They
with
lived
art
pretty
and
good.
culture and wine and food and psychedelics, and they were just like us.
Yeah. So I know you love the I don't want to call them conspiracy theories, but they're theories that don't go along with traditional modern scholars
That's
of
a great way
how
to put it.
things have progressed. So
Yeah.
it's kind of eye-opening and enlightening on, hey, maybe look at this.
Well, I'm just very interested in general of any crazy idea or suspicion or conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, of something that goes against the modern narrative that we know. You know, like
Yeah.
truth is so subjective. History is told by the winners. You know, so and history is this big, long, subjective. Who knows? It's a mystery,
Who
really.
knows? You weren't there.
You weren't there,
Yeah.
so who wants to be married to their ideas? You know, it's fun to kind of dip your toe into other things and talk about them. And at the end of the day, really, who knows?
Okay,
But
let's dip our toe into this. So we know that the Egyptians used boats, used vessels and this is why they built bigger and bigger ships. They put huge rocks that they quarried way upriver and they brought them downriver. And with those big rocks,
the pyramids,
built the pyramids. Now, there's only pyramids two other places in the world, I believe, in Thailand, in some areas around the Malay Peninsula,
and
and there.
other Polynesian islands too. They found them in the Philippines, you know,
Okay, so
kind
on
of
a
all in
smaller scale,
Indonesia.
yeah, but
Yeah,
they had pyramids. But where were the other place in the world that there were major pyramids built?
Central America.
Central America. So in 1970, trying to prove his point that the Egyptians absolutely could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean and made their way to Central America, the guy built, and I don't have the name of the guy, but he was a scientist from Denmark, one of the navigating, Sweden, Denmark,
Just an
somewhere up there.
absolute loon, but thank
Savage,
God for him.
savage. So he
People who
builds,
are willing to do this kind of stuff.
yeah, so he builds like one of their reed based, really basic boats,
Used what they would have used.
sets sail, goes through the Med, goes out to the Atlantic, and crash lands into Barbados 57 days later.
Only 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
if
the
you can
Egyptians
build
probably built it a little better.
and the Egyptians, and they were, a 1970 human, you need so much water, you need so much food. We say a human can't live 3 days. They probably could go 6 days without water.
Yeah.
They probably could go 4 months without food. So that is, this guy proved that in 57 days, he got a reed boat to go from Cairo
Yeah.
to Barbados,
Yeah.
which if
He
you're in
had
Barbados, can of corn, you're in Central America
yeah.
because there's so many islands that you can just keep jumping and hopping
It's
through all
treacherous
the
waters,
islands.
though. Bermuda
Treacherous waters.
Triangle.
Well,
You
no, the Bermuda
know,
Triangle's up higher. This was a little lower
I
latitude.
just mean like the hurricanes that roll through there. Like, can you imagine, you know,
Well, yeah, if
all those lost at sea
anybody that did it during hurricane season, but what did you get during hurricane season? Where do the hurricanes start?
out in the ocean
Off the west coast of Africa.
off
That's
the
where they,
west coast of Africa,
yes,
and
every
they come
hurricane that
all the
hits,
way.
it hits North America, that hits the East Coast and the Caribbean, starts in the same place, right off the north coast of Africa.
Ivory Coast?
Uh, yeah, yeah, close to that.
Yeah.
So if you were crossing that, now if a hurricane was just starting to brew, but what's moving that direction? A real prevailing wind. So
Yeah.
those people probably had a really tough time getting back. And who knows, even if whoever made that journey, did they ever get back? They might not have ever got back. But they took the idea from Egypt to the Aztecs. Aztecs built pyramids.
Or maybe it was the opposite way around. Or maybe someone else had the technology of the pyramids and stopped off in Egypt and then stopped off in Central America and then
But I think the Egyptian pyramids predate the Aztec and the Mayan ruins.
I think
So
that's a mystery.
yeah, and you don't. I mean, they say like, oh, 4 to 6 thousand years. Well, 4 to 6 thousand years, that's a 2,000 year window. That's a long.
But when you're carbon dating
That's
a
a big window.
yeah, when you're carbon dating a pyramid, you're grabbing the oldest sample that you know of. All of the old, they could be around
Yeah,
for
but
20,000 years.
you're
We don't
carbon
know.
dating a rock. So the rock is in the earth for 10 million years. It's dug out, so it's hard to tell when it was dug out.
Yeah.
So it is a big guessing game.
Yeah. All of this is take it with a grain of salt. These are our
Yeah,
best
but
projections, but
it's
it's so fun to I love this topic.
yeah, pretty cool that a guy can do that in 57 days.
I know.
Okay, moving on
Shout
from
out to
the
that
Egyptians.
that Dutch guy.
The next great shipbuilders were the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians.
Where are they from?
And they're from their homeland was where modern day Israel, Lebanon, and into southern Turkey. So right along
The Mediterranean.
the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. And they owned the Med. They operated from about 1000 BC to 600 BC. So they pretty much just predated the Greeks. And then the Greeks were big like 600 BC up until the Romans took over around the time of Christ. So the Phoenicians went all over, but they did some cool stuff. They're the first ones that really started to navigate. They could sail at night. They navigated on the stars.
Oh yeah, that's so cool.
They built a number of cities that all seemed to be one day sailing. So, like the missions in California were basically built a day's mule ride apart, a lot of the Phoenician cities were built one day sailing.
Well, that's interesting.
And they sailed to the island of Crete. They went all up and down, all through Turkey, modern day Turkey, the Aegean Sea, the east coast of Italy, all over where present day Libya is,
Tunisia.
Tunisia, up until Morocco. So they were all over the Med. They opened up trade routes. They did a lot of trading.
Did they
They
leave the Med?
I don't really know how much they left the Med. Oh, I know they left the Med because here's what they did. First of all, they were expert shipbuilders, but they were the first ones that have record to circumnavigate Africa. So they went out the Med all the way around the Horn, Cape of Good Hope, all the way back up, passing through Madagascar, up the Red Sea, and then they went through the Sinai. Then the Suez Canal wasn't there, so they had to do a little marching, but it
What'd they
wasn't.
do with their boats?
Well, I think they
Drug them
probably
across the sand?
walked it and then found that they had got back to the Med and either disassembled the boats or took them back around. But at that time, the Red Sea was a court, as a dead end.
Right, and now you can get through the Red Sea to the Med through the Suez Canal.
The Suez Canal connects the
And when was
Mediterranean
that built?
and the Red Sea.
Or in modern day history?
And yeah, it was built
Like
just, I believe it was built in the late 1800s, 1880s, 1890s. It was built before the Panama Canal. I know that.
oh, interesting.
And we're going to talk later about the
Two
Panama
biggest
Canal.
canals in the world?
Yes, Suez Canal and the Panama Canal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because the Suez is how all the goods from China and India make their way up into Europe and Africa
Oh yeah, that's
and the Middle East.
the main route through. And it's a quicker route. If you're shipping something from New York City, you don't want to go around the Horn of Africa. You want to go from New York City to through the Med, through the Suez Canal, and through to India and Asia and that way.
Oh, straight across the Atlantic through the Med, down the
Yeah,
Suez.
it's a shortcut for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when that boat blocked it up?
Yeah,
Got stuck.
yeah, that guy got fired. Yeah,
That's a bad day on the job.
a freighter. Well, I mean, we know
It was
currently
launched.
we're having a lot of troubles in the Red Sea now, but 20% of the world's goods ship through the Suez Canal.
Only 20%?
20%.
Yeah.
That's a lot of goods.
Yeah,
That's
I
a lot
guess
of
so.
goods. But that ship that got stuck, it was like 10 years ago. It literally pitched sideways.
10 years? No, that was like
5 years ago?
no, that was like 2 years ago.
2 years ago? Okay.
Recent.
So it pitched sideways, got stuck, ran aground, and literally just blocked the whole canal.
You know.
And then they had to jack the thing up. They had to empty it off to get the weight out, jack it up, and then right it. But it took a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So the Phoenicians were amazing. One thing that they did invent, started inventing keeled boats. So now if you're cruising up and down the Nile and you're the Egyptians, you don't really need the keel. But now you're circumnavigating and you're going around Africa, a flat bottom boat, you're toast. You're tipping over.
Mhm.
So by increasing the keel of a boat, it gave you stability in the open ocean.
Mhm.
So the Phoenicians were pretty cool. Keeled boats, they sailed, they traded all around the Med. And their boats, again, the Phoenician boats, they were bigger and bigger. Some of them, they said they could carry like 450 tons.
Wow.
450, so that's 900,000 pounds.
Of what?
Grain, lumber,
Spices.
rocks.
Spices don't weigh that much.
Yeah, they built some really big boats, and they had a lot of the ones that you see, the big oared boats, so a lot like the Vikings. So it tells me something went on where either Viking people of Germanic area, which were the Saxons, later on the Saxons, but they were of Germanic background.
Not dramatic, Germanic.
Germanic, yes.
He said
They,
dramatic.
they might have been Germanic, but they were Germanic. But did they like walk south and see the Mediterranean and get their ideas for building their boats?
One far away.
That's 1,000 miles.
In
It's
the in the vast scheme of
in the
the
big
world.
scheme of that. You walk a few miles, over 10 years, 20 years,
That's what
50
the
years.
ancients did. They just started walking.
Nomadic tribes.
Yeah.
So how did the Vikings invent this at the same time that other cultures were inventing, or it was it shared in some way? And I
Well,
think they're too similar. The ships look identical. They're both raised on both sides. They have battering rams. They have a square sail in the middle. They have oars, so you paddle or you sail. They're just really similar. Where I think there's something to be said about that.
yeah, I think it would be a really cool trip to go around to all of these regions of the world.
On a Viking ship?
No, but stop at in modern wherever modern day Phoenicia is. I'm sure they have a plethora of museums and real life exhibits. Like I want to see in person the scale of these ships.
Yeah.
I want to see what they look like, and there's probably some really cool Viking boat museums. And you could go from
Yes.
well Egypt and then up into Turkey and then over into some of the Viking territories, and then
So one of the best
we could film it,
maritime
make a
museums
documentary.
I've ever been to was in Amsterdam. I think when you were in Amsterdam, you were drinking way too much Heineken and going to the Green Grasshopper
I'll
too
tell you, I
much.
was not at the Viking Museum.
And you missed a great maritime museum
Oh, I know.
right on the shores.
We were only there for like 2.5 days, though.
Yeah. If we go back, this was a really good museum. And I imagine Denmark really has some good maritime museums as well.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna kind of parlay that into some epic journeys around the world in kind of a chronological order. And we're not going to bring up Christopher Columbus. because his journey was not that epic.
Yeah, it wasn't that impressive compared to these earlier ones.
Yeah.
But just a quick side note, in terms of, epic adventures, Amelia Earhart, there's speculation that this, like, billionaire real estate investor has basically retired and dedicated his life to finding Amelia Earhart's long-lost plane,
He
'cause
found it.
they've never recovered her plane.
I
He
know.
used sonar, and they think they found it, so
Yeah.
now they're in the works of the expedition of trying to recover the plane.
Yeah, it's not a big mystery where she's at because she was coming down into, I believe,
An
somewhere
island,
around
some
Guam.
yeah.
Okay. So she was coming down and she lost radio contact. And basically, if she had more gas, she would have been able to circle and find it, but it was all clouded in and she ran out of gas.
Poor
And
thing.
she just came up a little short. She was
Yeah.
almost there. So,
Yeah. I love that mystery, Amelia Earhart.
all right, five great sea voyages. I named it. So the first one is Leif Erikson.
Are these chronological?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the oldest one.
This is the oldest of the five great journeys I'm talking about. There was probably older journeys, many older journeys, but the first one I'm talking about is Leif Erikson
Yeah, these are the ones we
because
know about.
he's a Viking.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and I love the Vikings. Uh, even though they did wreak havoc on our
They
brethren
were a
in
brutal
in
bunch.
Ireland, but I just like the whole Valhalla and way of life, um, and
There's
they're
something very, captivating about them.
yeah, they tell good stories, but they were brutal. But they also lived in a time when kind of everybody was brutal.
That was how you that was
It was survival
it
of the
was
fittest.
survival.
And they were fit, big old Vikings.
Yeah.
So Leif Erikson was the son of Eric the Red. I'm sure he had
Oh,
a big
yeah.
head of red hair.
If you've watched Vikings, they talk about him.
They talk a lot about Eric the Red, but not about a lot about Leif Erikson because Leif Erikson was born in Iceland.
Okay.
So Eric the Red went from Denmark, did his pillaging around England and Ireland, and then set off for Iceland. And Leif Erikson was born in Iceland about 970. Uh,
BC?
no, not BC. Vikings were about 1000 AD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay. So, born 970, he set sail, left Iceland. And Iceland, if you look at it on a map, it's not crazy far from Scotland or England. It's it's far when you're in a rowboat, but
Yeah.
if you're on a cruise ship, it's a 2-dayer at sea. It's a couple days.
Like a 4-hour flight, I
It's
think,
from
from
San Diego to Cabo. It's
yeah.
not a crazy distance. But he took off. What he did is he went on a little voyage, and he had heard stories of more lands to the west. Well, were these stories from other Viking explorers, or was it just you look west and you think you see something in the horizon, so you think there's something more there? So he discovered Greenland, and he made a settlement on Greenland, which there wasn't much on Greenland. It was a big chunk of ice. But he kept going, and he went to Newfoundland.
Labrador.
Little further south than
So
Labrador.
he didn't sail into the Labrador Sea?
Yeah, I think he sailed all around there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he ran
That's
into
treacherous waters.
landed on Newfoundland. So he really is the first European to set foot on North America.
That we
We're,
know of.
yeah, we're talking 1000 AD. Now he was born in 970. Ironically, 1001 years later. I'm born 1001 years later than him. 1969. He was born in 970.
Wow.
Pretty cool. We're 1,000 years apart.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so and the Vikings just
What do you think
went all over.
men 1,000 years from now are gonna be like?
Oh, I don't know. They're not going to be like Vikings. And if you look at
They
how
might.
we still have a few Vikings left, most of them play NFL football or hockey. But yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
They're not going to be sailing around the world. They're going to be like in a hovercraft.
They might if we hit the reset button, we get another big comet or something.
We could get a comet.
Mhm.
Comet's coming. All right, so Leif Erikson was a great journey. Let's move on. Now we're going to talk about the Chinese, because all this stuff, you think the Chinese were very advanced in all these dynasties. All right, in 1371, this kid was born. His name was Zhang He. At 10 years old, his village got ransacked by another dominant village, and he became a slave at 10 years old.
Oof.
So he became a slave for the Ming Dynasty, and he worked his way up into the Ming Dynasty Navy. So the Ming Dynasty was building a lot of ships, and they went on a tear. They built a ton of ships. In 1405, he took off with over 200 ships, with 28,000 sailors on those over 200 ships, and ships as long as 400 feet. And they set sail, and they went all around the South China Sea, Philippines, Borneo, all the islands. I don't know how far south they got.
That's 140 people a ship.
Yeah, 140 people a ship. He had a ship that was 400 feet. There's some big ships.
Yeah.
And you need a lot of people to row those ships.
And they needed a lot of rations and food. And
a lot of fat. So that's like an armada.
yeah.
So really, really a cool. So, but the weird thing about this is they went all over. They gathered all this information. They made contact, trade routes, made contact with other cultures. But then he came back home, and within a few years, the Ming Dynasty fell. And by 1433, so 28 years later, after this huge journey, and this journey took a few years, they were out. They destroyed all the records of the journey, all the records of everything. And China's end of their sea conquest, it ended like that.
Why?
I don't know. Because when a dynasty changes hands, they like to purge, and they didn't like to
keep any reminder that something else existed.
Yeah. Instead of building on, building on what even the people you subjugated, instead of using that information, they just threw it away.
What's unfortunate about that situation too is that was probably the decision of one person.
Sure. Probably the emperor.
Going, wipe it clean.
Yeah.
Wipe
it clean. But isn't that crazy? And I think that says a lot.
Well, then how do you know about it if all records
Chinese
got wiped clean?
Well, there was the record of the ships going, but I mean,
the information collected and the
all
artifacts.
the information of all the trade routes and all the people and everything.
Where the voyage even went, we don't know. Just the general areas.
I'm sure they have some routes in it, but more what it was is that they stopped their sea exploration.
And sea exploration kind of connects you with the world, and you can learn new things.
This whole world's been slowly migrated, and different cultures and different people in different eras and times spanning thousands of years have moved around this earth.
All right.
And a lot of it done by sea.
So China, all of that was lost.
Yeah. So here in, the beginning of the 1400s, the 15th century, when Spain and Portugal and England and Holland and Denmark, and they were all cruising around and building bigger and bigger ships and getting further away, the Chinese weren't taking on the sea. So it really made for how China just was. It didn't expand. It was China, and it's been like that for 500 years.
A lot longer, right?
Well, 5,000 years, but for the last 500 years, they haven't increased their borders yet. Okay, next really good mission around the world. The first man to circumnavigate the globe. And who was that?
Magellan.
Good. All right. And he didn't even circumnavigate it. He didn't make it all the way, but his ships did. He did. So he was a very experienced sailor from Portugal. And in 1519, he left Spain with 260 men on 5 ships. And he set sail for Spain. He went around some really cool things he did. First of all, he named the Pacific Ocean.
Really?
Yeah, and Pacific means peace.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it means peaceful. Oh. So peaceful ocean.
Well,
it wasn't real peaceful.
Not always peaceful out there.
But he named the Pacific Ocean
those currents
peaceful. It was named after him, the Strait of Magellan. So he went around the tip of Argentina and Chile and navigated. There's a big series of islands around there. So it's not like Africa, where you get to Cape Town, you're at the Cape, and you keep going, and it's kind of just a continent.
A turn.
Yeah. There's no a series of islands. But the Strait of Magellan is a number of islands that you
Falcons?
navigate. No, the Falklands are a little up further in the Atlantic. It's basically the Strait of Magellan, and it's just a series of islands that you
Isn't
navigate
that
all
called
through.
something else now? Because I was looking into trips to Antarctica.
Yes,
What is it called?
I don't know,
I just looked it up.
but it's the Strait of Magellan. So he got that. So he's cruising around. He goes all around the Pacific. He gets into the southern Pacific, crosses over, I believe, north of New Zealand, Australia, hits all the islands. He ends up in the Philippines. So he's in the Philippines and he's in a little beef and he gets killed by a poison arrow.
Really?
Yeah, 1521. So 3 years later, it's taken him 3 years to get from Spain to the Philippines, and he gets this poison arrow and Magellan's dead.
Oh,
So his crew keep going. They lose a ship here. If you really dive into Magellan's journey, it's interesting. I mean, there's novels and books and just huge amount of publication
I
on
might
it.
need to. That's a really interesting topic.
Yeah,
I might need
and so
to.
he loses a ship, and they do this, and they crash land somewhere else, and they repair their ships, and they get food, and they capture slaves, and they enslave people into being, because they've lost so many of their crew dying from scurvy and disease. He did realize he was, I don't know if he was the sailor. No, it was after that. But one another sea captain said that fresh fruit gets scurvy away, but they didn't know how it did. They didn't know there was vitamin C in it.
Oh,
Yeah, so scurvy is caused by a vitamin C
deficiency.
deficiency, and he noticed that, and tropical fruit has a lot of vitamin C.
Yeah.
So all these guys going through the tropics, when they got fresh pineapples and mangoes and papayas, no one got scurvy. But when they didn't have those, they got it.
For long stretches out at sea when all you have
And
is,
scurvy is real dangerous. They say a large percent, like 7% of the American population has some form of scurvy.
and we just live with it?
Yeah, people just live with it. Makes you like, it thickens your skin. It makes you age quickly. Like
Interesting.
you ever see someone really, really skinny and they just look kind of decrepit? They probably have scurvy. All in sense of vitamin C. All they got to do is eat an orange, eat an apple, eat a banana, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
So Magellan gets wiped out. His crew goes on. They finally make it back in 1522, another year. They cruise the south coast of India, around the African Horn, back up into Spain. One ship makes it back, a crew of 18.
18
Yeah,
survivors.
260 leave. So talk about the Donner Party, where half of them made it. 216, 18 lived to tell the tale.
And, 18 who lived, probably maybe some joined the journey later. So who knows how many of the original crew.
Original crew, 18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so Magellan's now another young lady we have to bring up, who was just one crazy seagoing gal, was a girl by the name of Grace O'Malley. Grace O'Malley.
An absolute legend.
Yes, she was an Irish pirate queen, born in 1530, died at 73 years old in 1603. So she had a long life
That's a long life.
in that time. She came from the area of Westport
Mhm.
in County Mayo of Ireland. And she was a bad woman. She was kind of like a little pirate.
I mean, just any woman who in the 1500s manages to be a leader of a large group of men, just has
Yeah.
something in her.
So her
Just a
father
leader.
passed away, and he was one of the lords and owned huge, vast amounts of land. And then instead of her brother taking over, she was the dominant and she took over.
Yeah, her dad was like, "Hell no, I'm going with Grace."
She built ships and she used to sail to the west coast of England and plunder. And she would and go to their forts and invade them and plunder England.
Do Viking activities.
So in one case, why I bring her up, because I think this is a cool story, is she sailed to England and met with Queen Elizabeth I, and she was meeting with her to try to get a prisoner that they had taken. The English had taken some Irish prisoners of her relatives, and she was trying to go there and meet with her and try to
Negotiate a deal.
negotiate a release. And she walks into, I believe it was Greenwich Castle, and negotiates with Queen Elizabeth I. And a couple things that she did. First of all, she walked in with a dagger attached to her boot, and they like pat searched her down and found it. And she said it was just for her protection. But she comes walking in, the queen with a full dress on, with a dagger in her boot. And then she was given a handkerchief to blow her nose, and she used the handkerchief and she threw it in the fire, and they all gasped because it was like a silk handkerchief or something, fancy handkerchief. And she said, well, in Ireland, when you blow your nose, it's dirty. You throw it in the fire. So it's kind of showing the back, way she was from the northwest coast
A little
of
less
Ireland.
refined manners.
Yeah, and she's in the most refined place in the world, in the castle with Queen Elizabeth. But Queen Elizabeth met with her,
She was in the
and
most hoity-toity room in the entire world.
ironically, they both died the same year in 1603.
Wow. What was this last Queen Elizabeth? Was she the second or third? Do you know?
No,
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
But this was the first.
This was Queen Elizabeth I.
And Grace O'Malley sat down and said,
Yeah.
"What's up?"
So there should be a movie about Grace O'Malley. That would be a great movie.
Oh, yeah. The Chronicle of Her Life, this meeting with, it would be really cool to see a historical fiction reenaction of that.
Yeah. And I'd
Who
like to
would
see
play
it.
her?
Lady Gaga.
My dad loves Lady Gaga.
Okay, our last journey of these 5 is...
Lady Gaga would actually play a really good pirate.
I know, she'd be right on it. And she kind of looks that like
She
Italian.
could sing some tunes on the
Irish,
boat.
you could make it a musical.
Oh my God. Wow, that would be good.
Lady Gaga, if you're listening, it's a shout out to you.
Gaga, if you're out there.
Okay, the last of these 5 journeys, you're gonna tell me the ship, but it left Plymouth, England.
The Mayflower.
The Mayflower. And how do we know in our family about the Mayflower?
Because we have direct descendants that came over on the
You
Mayflower.
are a Mayflower descendant, Jessica Earnshaw. You are a descendant of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins, who came over on the Mayflower single, and then hooked up once they were in Plymouth.
Got together, we'll say, out of respect for our ancestors.
Yes, and then they married, and we are direct 11
So they individually
generations.
came over on the boat?
Yeah, they weren't married in England before. They were a single man and
That's
a single
interesting.
woman. So Priscilla Mullins came with her parents, and I think John Alden came as like
Bachelor.
came as a bachelor.
Wow, that's cool.
So you are, I believe I'm the 11th generation descendant of them, and you are the 12th.
So other than like this being culturally or historically significant because it brought a big load of settlers over from,
Not that big either.
okay, a small load of settlers over, but significant ones
Mhm.
to the New World. Was the sea journey really impressive, or was it pretty standard?
Brutal. So they left on an old merchant ship. 102 people boarded the ship. They left Plymouth, England in 1620, and it took them like over 2 months. It was a long journey. I want
Why
to say it was 60, because they got thrown off. And they were supposed to land around in between, somewhere around Philadelphia to New York. And they had authorization to go up the Chesapeake. They were going to either try the Chesapeake, because that's where the first Jamestown settlement was, from 1609. So this is 11 years later after Jamestown.
Mm-hmm.
So some ships had returned from Jamestown. So they were trying to seek out the Chesapeake, but they got blown off, and they got blown into Boston. So they were pretty far north. They were off quite a bit.
Yeah.
So they end up staying and naming it Plymouth Rock. And
Where they landed?
Yeah, they're found in their
Were they the ones who had Thanksgiving?
in the first Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So out of the 102, though, how many pilgrims were on board? 40.
Well, who were the other people?
The different guys, the sailors on the ship,
Traders.
and someone had to bring that ship back there. They weren't just going to leave it there.
Oh, this was just an Uber ride.
Yeah. So the pilgrims
Interesting.
were Protestant separatists, and they were leaving the Protestant Church of England, and they wanted a new start. So 40 pilgrims. So you can say you're a descendant of the first 40 people leaving England, coming to the New World.
There were no other people here?
Well, there was a settlement in Jamestown, but Jamestown was on and off and basically got wiped out
So
at one
Boston
time.
was created by these 40 people?
Yes. Well,
Wow.
then
I've
the
never
next,
even been to Boston.
and then loads kept coming. But as part of
That was the
original,
inaugural trip.
yeah, you're a direct descendant of the inaugural first 40.
That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
pretty cool. So the Mayflower, another go down 10 rabbit holes on that. But, it was a quick journey, but it was 1620.
Yeah, that's rough.
Okay, we're going to move along because we could talk about old sea travels and,
Interesting
James
voyages.
Cook, who traveled all around the Pacific. He was an English Navy, but they killed him in Hawaii. Got whacked in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the, Austronesian cultures who created the catamaran style boat.
Oh yeah, having an
And
outrigger on their boat, on their canoes,
Yep. And
because
all that technology to
canoes are cool when you're cruising around little protected bays.
yeah.
But when you get out into the open water, what do? Boom, they flip.
Yeah.
So they started putting outriggers. And those people went from Micronesia all the way to Hawaii in one of those
Mhm.
outriggers.
And all those Pacific islands in between, they went as far as Easter Island.
As far as Easter Island.
And Easter Island, those big stone faces?
Yeah.
Well, they dug them out only to their neck. And some recent research has indicated that if you keep digging, there's bodies to the heads.
Oh, those are just heads. So if you keep digging down, those are really statues.
Some of them have bodies.
And some have bodies.
Isn't that
But
interesting?
they haven't touched them, right? Because they're trying
Well,
to
they're
preserve them.
excavating, I think, slowly. I haven't really. I just saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Easter Island, there's nothing there. It's totally barren.
I know. There was like a one last civilization there, and slowly over time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
It's south of Hawaii.
Oh, it's way south of Hawaii. It's actually the place you get to it from, I believe, is New Zealand. You go
Yeah.
off from New Zealand and
Off
you
the
go
edge of the world.
and you travel from there.
Yeah.
Okay, so sea travel. So it's been going on forever. Now we're going to jump ahead, about 400 years, and we're going to go to modern sea travel. And one place that we brought up during talking about Virginia City and really talking about the gold rush. We've talked about the migration from the east coast of the United States to the west coast. So it keeps coming up, but the Panama Canal is a really interesting place.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to chat for a few minutes about the Panama Canal, because it was under the eye for so long before it was built. It was first talked about. Okay, so the Panama Canal.
The first time someone went around the horn, they said, "There's got to be a shorter way.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous."
Okay, they started negotiating with the Colombians. So Panama was not a country then. It was part of
What
Colombia.
year are we talking?
This goes back to 1826. We thought about building crossing the Isthmus of Panama.
The Isthmus.
The Isthmus. We've crossed one isthmus. What isthmus have we crossed?
We crossed the Two Harbors Isthmus on Catalina Island.
Man, that was a crossing. It was about a mile long and flat, but that was our journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Small isthmus.
So going back to 1826, they started saying we got to build something there. The English, they looked at, they had a plan to build a canal through there in 1843, and they scrapped it. It wasn't until 1849. What happened in 1849, Jess?
We got gold and we could bankroll some projects.
There's gold in them there hills. So the east coast of the country of the United States, and all wanted to get to the west coast. And it was a long road, as we know, through the Oregon Trail and the California Trail.
Yep, they heard about the Donner Party and said, "Can we go by sea?"
So it was a long ship ride around the Straits of Magellan, and very dangerous and seasonal. If you couldn't pass that a couple months of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1850, a real good businessman, I don't have his name, but in 1850, we built a railway, the Panama Railway. So we built, because they were what they were doing in 1849 is you take a steamship from New York and you would go to Cologne, which is on the Mediterranean, which is on the Caribbean side. And then you would go by wagon to Panama City on the Pacific side. You get on another steamship there, and you'd steam your way up to
Yeah,
San Francisco.
boat, land, boat.
Yes, it was like kind of a run, swim, run. So
Swim, run, swim.
swim, run, swim. So that fast. So this started happening really fast. And so in 1850, they built the Panama Railroad. So now you had a railroad going those, and it's only like 50 miles. The Panama Canal is 51 miles long, but it was more efficient than the wagons. So now,
Quick 50-mile race.
yeah, 50-mile race. And the Panama Canal is built parallel the railway. So they just followed the same route.
Yeah.
So now they're saying, hey, this is too short of a little land to get between the East Coast and all of Europe and the West Coast and all of Asia. We need to, this is a serious plan.
Yeah, it's
So
overdue.
it's
And
way
it's called the
overdue.
Drake Passage between the tip of Argentina and the tip of Antarctica.
Okay, so Magellan and Drake. So Sir Francis Drake, another one we could talk about for
Yeah.
4 hours, had a great, he
Well,
really
he
had a
was
great
more
career.
into mapping.
He mapped. He was a great
Yeah.
cartographer. He mapped a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
coastline. Okay, so Panama Canal, just a few stats here. It opening day, August 15th, 1914. So we're going to kind of work our way back. Okay. So the Panama Canal, we controlled it from the time it was done from 1914 through 1999. And we had a treaty that in 1914 we signed, and we said we'll run out at the end of the treaty. Well, guys back then in 1914 are like, I don't know, the end of the century, that's so far off. Well,
1999.
yeah, well, it came and went, and now we no longer control the Panama Canal, and I believe it's controlled by China. But it belongs to Panama, a sovereign nation, but I think it's mostly controlled by China because they do the most shipping in the world. So
Yeah.
very
Well,
important for them.
it becomes capitalism now. Private
Yeah,
business gets involved.
it's all
Yes.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay, so it started building in 1903. It took 11 years to build that canal.
Just digging out a canal.
Digging out a canal. It spans 51 miles. It's 51 miles long. And it was started in 1903 by good old Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt said, we need that canal.
Teddy Roosevelt did a lot of good stuff for this country.
You know,
I
he really
won't
did.
say that any president has ever been perfect in everything they've done, but Teddy Roosevelt with the national parks, I mean, that alone is like, thank God someone had the freaking wherewithal and insight into the future, not just their own lifetime, to go, let's save those for the generations.
I don't think Teddy Roosevelt took too many days off. He seems to be kind of the guy that probably worked like 6.5 days a week in the White House as president, and just was a really, really was a baller president.
Yeah.
So he got him. What happened was Panama was part of Colombia. So he got Panama to secede and have a revolution and become their own nation from Colombia. And that happened. Uh, the Colombians lost. It all broke up, but Panama declared their independence from Colombia in November 1903. And ironically, that's just when we started construction and we made the deal. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
were,
It was a multi-step plan. First, get
yes.
Panama to secede because we like Panama.
Well, because Colombia said they wouldn't do it. They wanted they wanted too much money to do it, and they wanted to sell it, and they wanted to still control it. So we said, oh, okay, well, we're going to get Panama to secede.
Yep. A little
It's his own
backdoor
country.
politics.
Some serious backdoor politics that
And
Teddy Roosevelt did.
ended up getting what we wanted out of it.
Yeah. So the canal, the French company really began the Panama Canal in 1880. So that's when it really began. So 1880, they started. They work on it for 9 years. They work 9 years, and because of the huge amount of malaria and yellow fever, all mosquito-borne illnesses, they lost 20,000 men working on that in 9 years.
Frenchmen?
Yes.
Dang.
Well, probably coming from all over the Caribbean. It wasn't probably a lot of Frenchmen. It was probably,
Yeah,
you know,
mostly, yeah.
the
Well,
plantation crowd from the whole Caribbean.
yeah.
But
Well,
20,000
anytime,
killed.
yeah, man, it feels like anytime there's a giant concentration of people like from different places of the world, immune systems mix,
Oh yeah.
and no one is immune to the same thing from different parts of the
But
world.
it's big camps
And
and
disease spreads so fast, and man,
yeah, 20,000. So they abandoned it 9 years later. So 1889, the French were like, we're out of here. They ran out of money. So from 1889 to 1903, what's that, 14 years, it just kind of sat all their equipment. So Teddy Roosevelt came in, uh, Panama's newly independent, and we give the French about 40 million for all their equipment. They had all the equipment there
and that was
already.
just a nice little couple of nuggets we found one day, like, super quick. Like, we all
Yeah.
the gold rush money just bankrolled that whole thing.
And then we gave Panama 10 million in cash.
And they said, "Thank you."
And they said, we'll take that 10 million in cash. And then, so basically for $10 million, we got 10 miles wide by 51 miles long, the whole canal. We got a
It's
canal
10
zone.
miles wide
We got the canal zone is 10 miles wide. So we
without the
owned,
canal itself.
no, no, no. The canal itself's 109 feet wide.
What do you mean 10 miles is the buffer so no one
Yeah.
can get within it to mess
Yeah.
with it type of thing?
We got 5 miles on each side. So that's the canal zone.
Oh, wow.
All right. Um, and it was completed 1914. So after it was completed, the first year, how many ships went through? 1914. Guess how many ships went through the 51 miles of the canal?
20.
1,000.
Yeah, they were like, "No time like the present. Let's go. Let's get them through."
So you better believe from 1903 to 1914, everybody was in line, like getting stuff shipped. So 1,000 ships the first year. That's 3 ships a day. In 2008, 15,000 went through.
Wow.
So not a crazy growth. I mean, 15,000 ships,
Yeah.
but that's almost 50 a day. Almost 50 ships a day
How many of
fill
those are
those
cruise
locks.
ships?
I don't know.
Are they
I
mostly cargo ships?
mostly cargo ships. Yeah.
But
Cargo
they
ships
let
are the big
but
ones.
you can cruise through the Panama Canal, right?
And it's expensive. Yes. So for a 50-foot craft, it's $1,300 to go through the Panama Canal.
So that's an extra fee they tack onto your cruise, there.
Yeah. So when you cruise, no, that's not for a cruise ship. That's for a personal. So let's say you got a 50-foot yacht. It costs you $1,300. A cruise ship gets charged per cabin, and it's about $110 per cabin.
That's not bad.
So if a cruise ship has 5,000 people, 2 people in a cabin, they got 2,500. 2,500. So they're laying down about $27,000 as a toll.
Yeah.
That's
That's
a
not a
little,
bad toll considering what the alternative is.
yeah, but that's pretty pricey. A toll,
Yeah.
26,000. They're
Well,
making
okay,
some
so
money.
if you were to do a trip, like, I just think sailing through the Panama Canal is kind of on your bucket list at this point.
Oh, how long does it take to go through? Average,
A day?
11 hours.
Yeah, half a day.
11 hours, half a day. So from starting out, your journey starts and all your locks, you go up.
Can you go both ways, or is it a one way?
What means it one way?
Like, you can like, it's like a two-lane road? Like, you can one people can go east to west and one people can go west to east?
I believe there are 2 lanes, but maybe they both go. Yes, they go both ways. I don't know if one direction only goes one way in one direction.
Yeah.
I think it's just per the lock. So, um, you get into a series of like little bays. So
Mhm.
you go through the locks, you get there, then maybe someone takes your place and goes the other
I
way.
was just really close to the Panama Canal in
I
Costa Rica.
know. I
It
think we got to do it one time.
it one time, if you were to do that trip, where would you go to and from?
Well, you'd leave here in LA or San Diego, and you would go down the whole coast through Mexico, through Central America, and then you go through the canal, and then you end up probably somewhere around Miami or Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
You can look at those cruises. They're
That'd
usually
be a
about
fun
2-week
trip.
cruises.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a lot
so
a lot of ground to cover.
I didn't bring this up about 1850. We built the Panama Railroad, but in 1849, how long did it take to make that trip from New York City to San Francisco?
A month.
40 days. So it was the single fastest way to get from East Coast to West Coast, 40 days. Steamship down, get your bags, get on a mule, get on the other side, steamship up. 40 days. So pretty cool.
Yep. I'd rather do that than I think go on land in a covered wagon.
How much did the Panama Canal cost?
300 million.
$375 million. including the 10 million we gave to Panama, the 40 million we gave to the French. But even the higher cost was the 5,600 men died during the building.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
not quite as bad as the 20,000 that the French endured in 9 years. So we put an army colonel in charge of the well-being of all those workers,
Hmm.
and he was big into spraying for the mosquitoes, having better hygiene, giving medication, and they only lost another 5,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, that's all very interesting. Do you have anything on
that's
the
my news.
maps? Because what is the number one thing that you need when you're sailing? Well, maybe not number one, but
Well, you need a good boat, or you don't sail very
yeah,
far.
yes, good boat, number one. But I think a really interesting part of all this is the mapping of it all.
Yes, and that is my background. I am a geography major from Chico State, and I was fascinated with maps as a young boy. I would grab the atlas and grab I had a big like coffee table atlas, and I would just sit there and look for hours and find if I was a Viking, where would I go? And
Well,
maps are a big part of our life.
yeah, Pappy Mappy.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about the mapping is, there's theories that maps have evolution rather than a lot of these ancient maps of Antarctica and really old seafaring maps. They weren't just concocted out of nowhere. They were reiterations of older maps and a
Yeah.
combination of multiple maps. And
Passed down from generations of generations,
yeah, and maybe
hundreds of generations.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and a map is just a piece of paper, and after 10,000 years, that paper is going to be disintegrated. So, you know, modern day maps, it's just really interesting to go back, especially with
Yeah.
Antarctica and some of
What
the
Jessica's referring
passages.
to is some of the Antarctica stuff, that Antarctica has not always been a sheet of ice. It was not always iced over. And they found that out because they got into the water, deep in the water, and they found silt from rivers running off in Antarctica. So
Yeah,
it
well,
was a warmer climate and it wasn't covered in ice.
and there were maps of Antarctica before we
Just
modern day discovered
discovered Antarctica.
Antarctica.
Yeah. So
So
people were
how
there
were there
before.
maps of it if we had just discovered it with Sir Francis Drake or, Magellan or whoever in 500, 600 years ago, whatever, modern day.
Yeah. So go back 1,000 BC, and your Australian sailors, who was pretty close to
They were
Antarctica,
close to,
they
to,
were
to Antarctica.
they were really close. So instead of just going north, they just had to go south, and they ran into it.
Yeah, and so they probably would have mapped it and explored it and seen what's up and created some maps, and those maps, I mean, what seafaring does, it opens doors of communication.
Yes.
So you're not just sharing spices and foods,
Or
you're
how to build
sharing
how to build the pyramid.
you're sharing knowledge and you're sharing what you've discovered. And I feel like we do that today.
Yeah.
Our whole world is so easily accessible and globalized because of seafaring.
Do you
Those
know
opened
who weren't very good sharers?
who?
The Vikings. They didn't like to share at all. They just plundered.
I know, they just took.
All right. Well,
But
that whole Greenland theory and the Antarctic theory could be possible
it's just fun to ponder.
venues for future
Episodes, yeah,
episodes of
there's
Pappy
some
Hour.
rabbit holes that we could have gone down, but this
But
is
I
a
hope you
fun
guys
one.
all enjoyed that. I mean, it's just talking about, when did ships start and all that. So it's a
Yeah.
good little
History is
little
fun.
overview, making history fun, making geography fun. Thanks for tuning in today.
Yep, this was episode 16 of Pappy Hour.
16 down,
So we're chugging along
116 to
and
go.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening. And shout out again to our producer,
Tristan.
Tristan Foster. Thanks
See
for
ya.
making it happen.